stern impassioned stress, a thoroughfare of freedom beat across the wilderness.
visual tefillah, so I'm really excited to share it with you.
Ooh, ooh,
Wow.
that's beautiful.
Yes, so everyone take a look
Ooh.
at this first slide. It's really beautiful.
Wait, is that Spock?
Yes. You'll see here the Spock hands are. It's actually the formation that the priests did when they were giving the priestly blessing, which is where he got that hand motion. But this it comes from a an artist. The last name is Brinjagard Bialik, and I'm trying to remember his
Isaac.
first. Isaac Brinjagard Bialik, and he creates these beautiful liturgical paper cuts using superhero comics. And so, if you look, you'll see Spock's face in there as well. Thanks to the CCR, we'll be praying with some new images today. So we'll start off. I'll ask everyone who is not intending to be heard to mute yourselves, and away we go.
It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. When I wake up, I say it's a brand new day. Moda ani lefanecha. Moda ani lefanecha. I come to you to offer thanks. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. When I wake up, I say it's a brand new day. Melech chai v'kayam. Melech chai v'kayam, source of life for all that is. It's a brand new day, brand new day. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. When I wake up, I say it's a brand new day. Shehechazarta. Shehechazarta bi nishmati bechemna. Gently you restore my soul. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. When I wake up, I say it's a brand new day. Rabba emunatecha, Rabba emunatecha. I know I can count on you. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new day. When I wake up, I say it's a brand new day.
Welcome, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. It's so good to see everyone's faces and to know that today the walls of our Mishkan stretch out even further to include folks who may be live streaming from afar or joining us on YouTube or JBS. So welcome to the sanctuary that we are all building together. And that beautiful setting, Jenna, whose setting is that of Modeh Ani?
Ellen Allard.
Ellen Allard. Well, it's beautiful. I had not heard it before Jenna introduced it. And one of the wonderful things about having our cantorial interns lead our Mishkan service with us is that we get to hear all sorts of new, wonderful music. And it ended by saying, I know that I can count on you. And not only do we know Hopefully that we can count on the source of life that brought us all here, but we can all count on each other to show up and to create sacred space together on these mornings. So we will continue. What do we count on God for? To return our souls to us in the morning, and also to return to us the possibility of the pure soul that we started off with. We get a brand new start. It's a brand new day, and we get a brand new start to be who we are meant to be every single day. So we will continue with the words of Elohai Neshama.
Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi. Join with me. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi. Ata verata, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. Ve'ata mishamra bekibi. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi. Elohai, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatata bi Tehorahi.
Thank you, God, for our everyday miracles and blessings. For happy are those who dwell in your house. Ashrei is on page 97. 97.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yehalelucha sela. 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 Yehalelucha sela. Yehalelucha sela.
Happy are those of us who remember that we are living in God's house. And now it comes time to name those everyday miracles that we may have experienced this week. And I love this part of the service, not only for hearing all of the miracles that you bring, but also because it forces me to find a miracle to share. And so this morning, as I was walking my dogs, I passed by a family with a young child who was saying, "Another red car, another red car. And look, there's another red car." And her parents said, "Yes, there's so many red cars." So my everyday miracle today is just that reminder of the possibility of curiosity and wonder at the very small things, and knowing that that is a doorway to blessing itself. So open it up and hear, what are some everyday miracles that have happened in your life over the past week or so?
Well, I made it through surgery on Thursday.
Well, that's not an everyday miracle. That's legit
It's a miracle.
a miracle in and of itself. I'm so glad that you did, and that you're well enough to be here. Good to see you, Jerry.
Yep.
I'm just thrilled that I wake up every morning.
So are we.
No one in my family has lived to this age. And to me, it's a miracle.
Do I remember that you have a birthday coming up next week, Laura?
January 3rd, 89.
Well, B'sha'a Tova, we can't wait to celebrate that with you, and we are so happy you're here.
Thank you.
I'm thrilled that Laura wakes up every morning.
Okay, Laura.
Thanks, Deb.
Carolyn.
Hi, I'm a little bit behind Laura, a little bit ahead of Laura. On January 6th, I'll be 92.
Wow, good for you, Carolyn.
Wow.
Yep. It takes a lot, Laura, I know. I'm telling you, every year is more like more than a year. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, I thank God every morning when I wake up for giving me another day. And before I go to sleep at night, I thank him again for giving me the wonderful day he gave me. Whatever happened, it's wonderful because I'm still here.
I feel the same way. I can't believe it's,
Yeah.
I can't believe it's so many years, 92. I mean, I remember being 90. I mean, really, at 90, I couldn't believe it. Now I can't believe that it's gone by for 2 more years.
Yep.
For the rest of us, the kindness that both of you bring and the wisdom that both of you bring is a gift to us. That's my miracle. And I get to hear them every week, and this way is also a miracle.
As I speak to you, I'm having trouble getting my computer. I mean, I'm on my iPhone, and I guess I'll watch this on my iPhone. I can't get it on my computer. Ed, somebody had to send me the link yesterday because you weren't around to do it.
Well, let's give thanks for Ed. So Lisa put in the chat that she is thankful that her daughter and her coworkers received their first dose of the vaccine last week, and it has indeed been a miracle to see all of those shoulders, those bare shoulders with Band-Aids on them, proclaiming the beginning of this new miraculous time. Any other miracles that folks would love to share? Phyllis.
The annual miracle. I'm excited that the days are going to get longer, starting Monday with the solstice. Something to look forward to. Spring, any day now. Well, any month anyhow.
Good to take the long view. And the good news is that the longer you're around, the more trusting you can be that spring is going to come this year too, just based on past evidence, right? So any other faces I want to make sure I'm seeing? Monica, sorry, you were on my second page. So
sorry, I think when you put yourself on, when you stop the video camera, you move pages. anyway, mine would be yesterday. I was on a Zoom family call with my chosen family, who I normally spend Christmas with, and my girlfriend's 2-year-old niece was on the call, and I haven't seen her in 6 months, and she is talking up a storm. She got a baby Yoda for her birthday, which, if you haven't seen the baby Yoda, it's quite a spectacle. And she just could not stop, like, sort of singing and chirping about baby Yoda. And it was just so amazing to hear a child's voice, because being in isolation, I haven't been around a lot of young children at all. And it was great to hear. It felt like a sign of normalcy is ahead.
Yes, and Arden shares that actually being asked what holiday I celebrate is also an everyday kindness, and again the miracle of curiosity. So with all of these miracles and the moments large and small that remind us that we live in God's house, we will continue by giving thanks with every tool that we have and every breath that we take, with Psalm 150. Hallelujah. Please rise if you are able to wake ourselves up this morning with our call to worship.
Yai,
seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer uvarei choshech oser shalom uvorei et hakol Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer uvarei choshech oser shalom uvorei et hakol.
In the beginning, even then, a new light was sown for the righteous, a promise that your light would become the catalyst, first for order and then for hope. Author of language and light, help us to use words as you have, to cast light into dark waters and draw out justice and truth.
Or chadash al Zion ta'ir v'nizkechu lanu mehera leoro Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hameorot. וקרבתנו לשמך הגדול, סלע באמת, להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
As we see those first doses of the vaccine start to be administered, we can almost taste the redemption that we are praying for about to happen. And so with that sense of hope and expectation, we join together in our prayer, our song of redemption that we sang together at the sea.
Goalenu, 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 Adonai Tzevot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Gal, 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 Israel.
Please rise if you are able for our Amidah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'Konei Hakol, V'Zocher Chasei Avot v'Imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah Gibul Olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim, Atah Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv HaRuach U'Morit HaGashem. Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed, Mechayei Metim Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Verofei Cholim, Ulmatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Michamocha Bal Givurot, Ulmido Merach, Melech Meimit Umechaya, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman Ata L'chayot Metim, Baruch Atah Adonai, Mechayei HaMetim. Yai la 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 la, ya la la la. שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלוך על הארץ, Adir Adireinu, Adonai Adonai,
Maybe there's a prayer that you didn't know you were carrying with you into this space that has shaken loose from all the prayers that we've sung and prayed together, the prayers of our ancestors who gave us words to pray when we didn't have words of our own. But maybe there's something you haven't prayed for yet. Maybe there's one more prayer you need to say. So we will take a few moments in silence to pray or to reflect or to simply be. Well, I could listen to that forever. Thank you so much, Jenna. Well, now we get to learn a little bit together, which is always one of my greatest joys, to work to learn with you all, because I always learn so much. So we will join together in the blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praised is God who blesses us with commandments, one of which is to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. So we will do that this morning, and we are going to dive back into the story of Joseph. We spend a long time in the story of Joseph because it's our longest continuing narrative in the Torah. So we'll spend a little time there together this morning. And I warn you that we are going to have a fair bit of reading to do together before we get where we're going, but I promise we're going somewhere. So I'm going to call on a bunch of folks to help me out with reading, and I hope you will help me. So raise your hands if you have the text sheet available to you. Actually, I will pull it up in just a moment. So let me see, where did I put it? This is how you know it's live. You know it's live because I clearly needed another cup of coffee so that I could remember to have it up on my screen for you. But here we go. And see, I should have used the beautiful time that Jenna was singing to do this, but what can I say? I was busy praying. So here we go. Great. Paula Hunker, can I ask you to read this first chunk of text, which will be familiar to anyone who enjoyed Joseph and his amazing Technicolor, is it Dreamcoat? Something like that. It was my favorite album as a child. I used to listen to it on my dad's vinyl record player, listening with these giant headphones to this record. Anyway, take it away, Paula.
Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Leaving Pharaoh's presence, Joseph traveled through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of plenty, the land produced in abundance, and he gathered all the grain of the 7 years that the land of Egypt was enjoying and stored the grain in the cities. He put in each city the grain of the fields around it. So Joseph collected produce in very large quantity, like the sands of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the years of famine came, Joseph became the father of 2 sons, whom Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, meaning God has made me forget completely my hardship in my parental home. And the second he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fertile in the land of my affliction. The 7 years of abundance that the land of Egypt enjoyed came to an end, and the 7 years of famine set in, just as Joseph had foretold. There was famine in all lands, but throughout the land of Egypt there was bread. And when all the land of Egypt felt the hunger, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. And Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. Whatever he tells you, you must do." Accordingly, when the famine became severe in the land of Egypt, Joseph laid open all that was within and rationed out grain to the Egyptians. The famine, however, spread over the whole world. So all the world came to Joseph in Egypt to procure rations, for the famine had become severe throughout the world.
Great. So this is a familiar telling, right? Pharaoh has these dreams about the 7 skinny cows and the 7 fat cows, and Joseph interprets them so that he knows he needs to lay in reserves during those 7 years. And then he sets up storehouses and rations out the grain so that everyone has enough during this time. So now we're going to look at a couple more parts of the story. The first one we talked about last night. Joseph's brothers come. He reveals himself to them and says, God has sent me ahead of you so that I can save everyone from this famine. And then we see this part of the story, which often we don't focus as much on. So I know that we have a bunch of different, it's long, so we'll break it up. But can I ask, let's see, Phyllis, would you do some reading for us today?
Yes.
Great.
Genesis 45, 4-7, right?
Let's do 47, 11 to 26.
Got it. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers, giving them holdings in the choicest part of the land of Egypt, in the region of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Joseph sustained his father and his brothers and all his father's household with bread, down to the little ones. Now there was no bread in all the world, for the famine was very severe. Both in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Joseph gathered in all the money that was to be found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan as payment for the rations that were being procured. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's palace. And when the money gave out in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, lest we die before your very eyes, for the money is gone." And Joseph said, "Bring your livestock, and I will sell to you against your livestock if the money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, for the stocks of sheep and cattle, and the asses. Thus he provided them with bread that year in exchange for all their livestock.
Great. Ed Saslaw, will you take over?
I have to find where we are.
We're on verse 18.
I got that part. We're on verse 18.
Yeah.
I'm coming.
And when that year, it says.
Got it. And when that year was ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, "We cannot hide from my lord that with all the money and animal stocks consigned to my lord, nothing is left at my lord's disposal save our persons and our farmland. Let us not perish before your eyes, both we and our land. Take us and our land in exchange for bread. And we with our land will be serfs to Pharaoh. Provide the seed that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become a waste." So Joseph gained possession of all the farmland of Egypt for Pharaoh, every Egyptian having sold his field because the famine was too much for them. Thus the land was passed over to Pharaoh, and he removed the population town by town from one end of Egypt's border to the other. Only the land of the priests he did not take over, for the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh had made to them. Therefore, they did not sell their land. Then Joseph said to the people, "Whereas I have this day acquired you and your land for Pharaoh, here is seed for you to sow the land. When harvest comes, you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh, and 4/5 shall be yours as seed for the fields and as food for you and those in your households, and as nourishment for your children." They said, "You have saved our lives. We are grateful to my lord. We shall be serfs to Pharaoh." And Joseph made it into a land law in Egypt, which is still valid, that 1/5 shall be Pharaoh's. Only the land of the priests did not become Pharaoh's.
Great. So what jumps out at you from either the first part of that telling or the second part, or maybe that the two that are held in tension with one another? Barbara Johnson.
That the government didn't take care of the people by allotting everyone bread, but sold them bread in exchange for their land. So the riches came back to the government, to the Pharaoh.
Right.
It's
a different picture. It's a different picture, with one exception of the priests, right? Which we note is the opposite of the system that will eventually be instituted for the Israelites, where the priests actually don't have their own land, and they live off of the, off of the offerings that folks bring to the temple.
Yeah.
Arden says, it reminds me of Jacob asking for Esau to give the birthright for the stew, except less deliberate, but still taking advantage of the Egyptians. That came to me too, Arden, when I read that this week, thinking about what is it to engage in commerce with someone when they are in a moment of desperation, right? Phyllis.
The worst line is he removed the population town by town from one end of Egypt to the other. So that's villainous. He's breaking down communities. What was that all about?
Well, let's open it. What do folks think? What do folks imagine that part was for, Monica?
The reorganization of the land. So if you want to be feeding people and you have limited stores, you need them closer to where the food is, especially if the food spoils. And also, if you're going to make everything a piece of agriculture, you want to spread out the land. I mean, it might not be as evil as it is more a business strategy, although there's certainly a lot of evil in uprooting people in a time of need. It's not unlike what's happening now, of course. There's a lot of food insecurity. People are moving to places with their families. They're, becoming displaced in the name of saving themselves. And there is going to be a lot of change in how we do business after COVID, in being a partially virtual business world and a partially not virtual world.
Eric Weiss, good to see you, Eric, all the way from Florida. Thank you for joining.
I love you. Okay, it sounds like they're rounding up the populace to put them on the plantations. I'm sorry to say, because it's like the book that I read by Candace Owens. They're making people dependent on the government instead of themselves, so they lose their freedom. Capiche?
Yes, capiche. Thank you. Paula Hunker.
So it's interesting because there's two ways of looking at it, and I had feelings on both sides. On one side, the best of government is when it creates a safety net and is able to help those that are least able to help themselves. And I guess in an ideal world, in heaven, we'd all help each other and we don't need an organizing body to do that. But then the worst of government is when they take advantage of people at their most vulnerable. And so you could really see how the intent might have been good. And it was in a way that may have been the only way that literally the entire nation was saved. But all it takes is a bad pharaoh or a leader with ill intent, and he converts the whole thing. And I don't want to go into politics, but you could see that how that happens, even today.
Great. Barbara Johnson?
I'm really struck by, I feel like we were just at a place where we were talking about how we should leave a portion of our fields around the edges for those who couldn't, who didn't have. And now that's been flipped to Joseph made it into a law that a fifth should be pharaohs. And another thing I want to ask is when it says that he removed the people, what is that like? I'd like to know what the Hebrew word was. Is it really remove? And what does that mean? Did he move them or did he remove as in kill? Like, I wish I had more clarity there.
So I'm just taking a look. So he moved them from town to town. So I think what you can imagine is that he's sort of scrambling the location of people, right? And we know that actually that's a tool that people use, that nations use, because it then divests people, right? he's divested people of the ownership of their own land, right? And so if you move them to different parts of the country, they're no longer working on land that, their family has farmed for generations. And it serves to sort of break that sense of ownership, because now they're sharecropping, right? They've gone from being maybe subsistence farmers to being sharecroppers. And so Cynthia Johnson says it sounds like Native Americans' land being taken and then reservations made and then chipped away at. Right. So that's exactly what the U.S. government did, right? We took Native populations from where they were in, the South and moved them to Oklahoma. And there's a reason you do that, because it causes a different relationship to the land. Monica says it also sounds like they would have died had they not restructured, and that's the crux. It's exactly what Paula was suggesting before, right? We have to. There are all kinds of decisions that governments need to make in order, very difficult ones, as we know from all of the, lockdowns and quarantines that we're living with right now, to save lives, and that those choices can make, can have real repercussions for people's lives. So I want to read one more part of the story here. Let's see. So let's see. Monica, would you read for us Exodus, from the very beginning of Exodus?
Joseph died and all his brothers and all that generation. But the Israelites were fertile and prolific. They multiplied and increased very greatly, so that the land was filled with them. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Look, the Israelite people are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them so that they may not increase. Otherwise, in the event of war, they may join our enemies in fighting against us and rise from the ground." So they set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built garrison cities for Pharaoh, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that the...
Oh, sorry. This is what happens when I read on my page. Go ahead.
Where am I now? So that the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors they had made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made life bitter for them with harsh labor and mortar and bricks, and with all sorts of tasks in the field.
Great. Thank you. So the two verses that jumped out at me when I reread our portion this week were the juxtaposition of these two verses, Genesis 47, verses 12 and 13. Joseph sustained his father and his brothers and all his father's household with bread, down to the little ones. Now there was no bread in all the world, for their famine was very severe, right? So we have this sort of difficult juxtaposition here of Joseph moving his family effectively, into Goshen and effectively like the suburbs of Egypt here, and eventually, and then setting up this system, this economic system that we've been talking about, and eventually, the Israelites are doing pretty well. They've been fertile and multiplying, and there comes a Pharaoh who does not know Joseph, and there starts to be resentment against this population that is doing relatively well. And you have the Egyptians basically coming out into the street with their torches and saying, the Israelites will not replace us. And so what I wanted to think with you guys about today is how we make sense of the life that we live. We are story creating animals, right? Among all of the animals, we create narratives and stories to explain our experience. But the narrative we tell can be really different depending on where we start the story and where we end the story. So do you start and end the story around Pharaoh's dream of the cows, and then, amassing the grain and distributing it? Do you end the story at, the consolidation of wealth and power to Pharaoh, in a life-saving, administrative system that ensures that everyone has enough to eat? Do you end the story with the eventual, resentment that comes from against the people who had been in a place of relative privilege? Do you end the story with Moses, rising up and leading them to freedom? All of those are very different stories that we could tell depending on our starting and stopping points. And it's important, I think, for us to be aware when we are telling our own stories of where we're choosing to start and end them. Because often, right, if we're still alive, then we don't know the ending yet of our own story. And we choose sort of where to begin. So I wanted to reflect on that with you and think about, are there stories that we are telling about the time we are living in that might be different if we chose a different beginning or ending point? Or does this strike you in some other way that you would love to share? Susan Picker.
So I suddenly started thinking, as you were speaking, about the Roosevelt era, which is something that my mother used to talk about a lot. She was in junior high school during the Depression, and there were rules that were set up so that people had to all wear the same uniform, so no one knew who was wealthy and no one knew who was needy. And I don't think at that time, with all the programs that Roosevelt began, that people put labels on what was happening. It's just that people started being able to make a living again, and people started being able to eat again and not stand on long food lines. Now I think, looking at the story of people who have forgotten Roosevelt and don't understand a good deal of what he did, all of a sudden there's this fear, and there are labels that are being placed on people who would like there to be greater equity and more for people. So if I, at my age, can look back and see a longer line of history, look at things differently from people right now who don't look and see that line of history the same way.
Thank you. Other folks, just want to make sure I'm seeing both pages. Doron? You'll need to unmute yourself, Doron. Let me see. I'll ask you to unmute.
All right. So you were giving a number of examples of the potential beginnings and endings of stories, a little earlier, a little later, etc. But what if we look at the entire Tanakh? Now, we don't know, regardless of what your view is as to when it was written, maybe more than one time, but we have this extraordinarily long period of time. And if we were to imagine somebody or a number of authors deciding to write over a period of time that included hundreds of these stories, and that was their starting point, to tell a story that included hundreds of stories with enormous changes in the history of people, with great things happening and terrible things happening, and that was the story. So if you have that view of history, that history is maybe perhaps totally unpredictable, may have extraordinarily good things happening, extraordinarily bad, and that is the totality of your story, then of course you would have a very different view than if we took the relatively few verses that you were mentioning as potential starting and endpoints. And I'm not sure exactly where it would lead us, but it would be a much more complicated view of history, either personal history or national history.
Thank you. Right. And of course, we know, anyone who's sort of studied historiography, right, that it's the choice of what to include in the canon in the first place is itself a narrative effort, right? What makes it into the story and what doesn't, and where do you stop it? And how does it lead to folks feeling like, our vast body of midrash, for example, people say, well, but that's not in the Torah, that's just made up, right? Well, it was all oral history, and some of it got, consolidated into a book, and some of it didn't. But yes, we're always writing history. Did I see Ron? Did you have a hand? No. Okay. Let's see. Who else?
Paula.
Paula.
So I think the point that you bring up is it just strikes me so strongly of the time that we're living in now and the multiple narratives that are going on. And unlike years ago where the people in power told the story, and that became very, very skewed by a very narrow group. Now there's so many ways that stories are being told, and you just wonder how history will reconcile that. And one of the things that I find, so worrisome is the way that, for instance, when our plague of the time, our famine is COVID, and how there's these competing narratives where even wearing a mask has become, a symbolic of what side you're standing on. And you just worry how this will last into history in terms of, not who, I don't want to say who wins the narrative, but how you reconcile narratives that are so starkly different.
Mm. And COVID too, it depends on where you start the story, right? So you could start it with that wet market in Wuhan, right?
The China flu.
Right? You could start it there. Or you could say, actually, the story starts when we started so encroaching on the forest land,
yes,
that we brought people into proximity with animals that we had never been in proximity with before, allowing that jump of a virus from one population to another, right? If you start the story there, it becomes a very different story. And then if we think about, God willing, we feel like we're on the cusp of the end of this story, right? Please God, let 2021 be better than 2020. With the vaccine, we feel like, oh, this period, we keep on talking about like, well, when this crisis has passed, right? But what is the next part of the story going to be? Because if you look in today's New York Times on the front page, right, it's all about how the inequality in distribution of this vaccine is going to amplify the inequality in the world between developed nations and less developed nations, because the developed nations are getting the vaccine first. And that is going to put the less developed nations at a disadvantage, right? Will that be the story we tell? Will the story we tell be that this was the moment when we all figured out that it's actually possible to live our lives without traveling so much and burning so much fossil fuel? That would be a different end of the story, right? I'm watching this history show about the Victorian era, right? And so you could tell a story about how there was great hunger in England during the Victorian era, and the Industrial Revolution and the trains that develop were a solution to mass hunger. Or you could tell a story, if you go forward, about how the industrialization led to different effects. So I think you're right. Even in this moment, we have to think about what is the story that we're telling. So I wanted to share one last thought, and this comes from Yael Greenberg. I included the site to her sheet. And she's talking, this comes from a Seder supplement. And she says, let me just share here. She says, and yet in 21st century America, it can be hard to see ourselves in the classical Jewish narrative of they tried to kill us, we survived. Something about a cycle of oppression and redemption doesn't quite grab us, because the last time we were deeply oppressed was 2 generations ago. Although I'm not sure when this was written, right? I think events of Charlottesville and rising anti-Semitism might color some of this for us. When we try to claim that we are currently oppressed, it often feels hollow and manufactured, because we see others around us who are suffering much deeper injustice than what is inflicted upon us in this moment. However, when we notice that oppression and redemption isn't the whole story, something starts to shift. In between redemption and the next oppression is the creation of a context. In between redemption and the next oppression is the rise to a position of relative power and privilege, and that is part of the story too. Because we want to make sure the last persecution really was the last one, we cozy up to the leaders, we gain power that is tied to theirs. We use that power to protect ourselves and our kind, and we become more or less indifferent to the suffering of those around us. We may even be complicit in our societal systems of oppression. On the whole, we are materially comfortable. But this is the paragraph that I loved. What we tend to forget during this stage of the story is that this too is part of the story. When the tides of change sweep through the broader society, our comfort, wealth, and power are on the line. When others around us are feeling disempowered, it is only too easy to notice our social position. When the masses are impoverished and distressed, suffering at the mercy of a societal structure that was built to privilege the few, they too can point to Jews in high places. Now, this is very difficult text. Our advantage is tied to Pharaoh's throne, etc. So obviously this is agitational. But what I wanted to think about, I wanted to say, we're aware that we are smack dab in the middle of the story here, right? But we're always in the middle of the story because life continues on. There will be more chapters. And part of our question is, what do we want the next chapter to be? Because whatever the next chapter is going to change the story we are able to tell of this time. Was this time a time of greater creativity and resilience and change and a real reckoning with ourselves about the world we have created and what we've done, right? Or was it a time of even greater disparity and consolidation of power in the hands of the few? It's gonna change how we decide to tell the story going forward. So any thoughts, since I've thrown a lot at you today, Barbara?
I was going someplace completely different until your last.
No, go someplace completely different. That's great.
No, but your last sentence took me someplace huge, which is, in the beginning of what you were saying, I was thinking about how much I don't want to go back to the old normal. And I cringe at the word normalcy and normality, those words, because that was not a good thing for a lot of people where we were. And I have been actually working a lot lately on breaking habits, because I feel like if I can break some habits, then when there's the call to return, I can be more effective at breaking the habits that so call to me as comfort. But what you just said, really hit me in my core of, yes, I have struggled, I have suffered this year, all of those things. But relatively speaking, I'm very okay. I have food, I have a home. And so therefore, I have a luxury of being able to do this internal spiritual work. And I'm reminded of years ago hearing an NPR story where they were talking about the rainforests. And in South America, this man said, you can talk to me about how great all the trees are, but I have to feed my family. And so I have to think about my family, and that means I have to cut down trees to feed them. And so I think about this luxury I've had of doing this internal work and this spiritual work when I know there are other people around the world who haven't had a moment to stop and think, or maybe even to pray, because they're on that hustle. They're on that, they're trying so hard to survive that they're doing everything they can to find and to take and to work to try to feed their families and themselves. And so again, I'm now repositioning myself in the story, and that's really having a profound impact. So thank you for that. Everywhere you just went was really quite extraordinary.
Thank you. Anyone else? Richard, I haven't heard your voice today. It's a pleasure to see you.
Always good to be here. You know, at the Passover Seder, we're told that we're supposed to tell the story, and we're Jews of the book. And over my left shoulder, I have a bunch of books about Robert Moses, and I kept thinking about Robert Moses when we were talking about Joseph. And next year, God willing, if we're back at Lincoln Center, probably with masks and maybe not sitting next to each other. But, you know, Lincoln Center, when we go there, that you walk on, it's a beautiful place. We have the story of it recently being refurbished, but life is not that simple is the lesson I think you're teaching, that there were people who lived where Lincoln Center was, who were moved out without their choice to eminent domain, which is in a sense what Joseph did here, to make that possible. So I think the lesson I'm taking from this reminds me that when you think things are simple, whether it's the way people are behaving or the way politicians are behaving or arguing with people politically or different ideas, that it's not, that the assumption that things are simple is a terrible mistake when one gets into understanding or arguing or understanding the positions of others. And I think you and Rabbi Greenberg in her comments make that very, very clear.
Thank you. Thank you. So to close, I will...
I was going to say something.
Oh, sorry. Who's speaking?
You haven't had a chance. Florence.
Oh, Florence, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in terms of stories being told, what the story is going to be told about the education of our young people. Is this going to be a lost generation of children? And what about the digital divide? What is going to happen when there is in-person learning again? Will there be a great need for remediation? I'm just wondering about that.
As someone with 2 teenagers living at home, I'm wondering about that too. So thank you. So I wanted to take up, Richard's invitation. Maybe our blessing that we take from this time together is that as we go out into the world, may we pay attention to what narrative it is that we are telling about the moment we're living in. May we be curious about other narratives that might exist, that might explain something that happened before, or that might be a harbinger of something that is to come. May we be aware that our story is not the only story that could be told about events that happened. And may we feel the power and agency of our piece of the story that we are in right now, and the effect that we can have about whatever the next chapter is that is about to be written. And may whatever actions we take be for a blessing, not only for us, but also for those who are living in a time when blessings are so very few. So thank you so, so much for this time. It was, as always, very, very enriching. So I'll turn it back over to Jenna.
We now take a moment to think of those in our lives who are in need of a prayer for healing. So whether you would like to say those names aloud, you can unmute and do so, or add them to the chat. Please do so now.
Kelly Caraballo, Sagarda Fikak.
Thank you. And with those names in our hearts and on our minds, we join together in this prayer for healing, the Mishaberach. Mishaberach
מקור הברכה לאמותינו. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi sheberach imotenu mikor habracha lavoitenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
And we now rise in body or in spirit for V'hashevota, a part of our Aleinu prayer. V'hashevota el levavecha ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol ha'aretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad.
Someone said once, history does not always repeat itself, but it rhymes. And now we think about those in our lives who are no longer a visible part of our story, perhaps, but whose actions and lessons have set the rhythm and the rhyme of our own life. So if you are in a period of mourning, I invite you to say, if you're in a period of Shiva, I invite you to share the name of someone you are missing today. And if you are in a period of Shloshim, the first 30 days of mourning a loss, I'll invite you to rise. If you're at home, wherever you are, you can rise and share the name of the person who you've lost.
Tim Whitfield.
If you're in the first year of mourning a loss, I invite you to rise and share the name of your loved one.
Beverly Johnson.
David Cantor.
And if you are observing a yahrzeit, an anniversary of death this week, I invite you to rise and share the name of the one that you are remembering.
Tova Zifsider.
Thank you. For all those who we've named and those who we're holding in our hearts, for those who have no one left to say Kaddish for them, we join as one community in the words of Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, which is found on page 294 or on your screen. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, ve'alma divrach yiruteh, ve'amlich malchuteh, v'chayachon u'vyomechon, u'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, Bagala uvisman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevarach le'alam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithale v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimramav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
We close with the words of La Yehudim together. La Yehudim, hayta ora, v'simcha v'sason v'ikar. La Yehudim, hayta ora, v'simcha v'sason v'ikar. King tielanu,
How wonderful. How wonderful it has been to spend Shabbat morning with you all. And now we will, this is the part where Ed gets to be happy that we're all together and he doesn't need to miss out on the Kiddush because it's not going to fade out. So let's do Kiddush together. Or actually, we're going to do Vishamru, aren't we, Jenna?
Let's do a little Vishamru.
Let's do Vishamru.
Vishamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. B'ni u'vein b'nei Yisrael, oti leolam, oti leolam. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim ve'et haaretz. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. Veshamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat lidorotam berit olam.
And we lift up our cups Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Amen. L'chaim.
Okay, who brought bread today? Ed. Nice. Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
To Shabbat Shalom, everyone. To our broader community, we say Shabbat Shalom, and we will see you. For those who are on the Zoom, you are welcome to hang back a minute and chat, but we will say goodbye to our extra virtual friends now. So thank you all, and wishing you a sweet Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.